Welcome back. You tune into your Feel Good Breakfast Show. This is Expresso only on SABC3. Thank you for joining us so early on this Monday morning. We talk about the Great Barrier Reef in Australia this morning, and it certainly is the world's largest living structure and the only reef system visible from space as well. Now, recently, an online article claimed that the Great Barrier Reef had died, and then shortly after, a New Zealand article was released disputing the claim, stating that the reef is still in fact very much alive. Now, this morning we are joined in studio by the Senior Manager of the Marine Program from WWF South Africa, John Duncan, just to make sense of the current situation. John, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Appreciate it, man.
Pleasure.
So this is worrying. I mean, when we hear articles like this being published, even if it's being disputed that the Great Barrier Reef has died, I mean, this is really, really worrying. And we're thinking global warming, we're thinking rising sea temperatures. What is going on? Is it dead or is it still very much alive?
I think it's somewhere in between. I think we definitely put it in a hospital room at the moment. I think really what we're seeing is the way that coral works is that it's actually a combination of two organisms that live together, a little animal and an algae. And when the sea temperature gets too hot, the coral organism spits out the algae. Now the algae produces the food for the coral, so it can only survive for so long without that algae. Okay. If the water cools down again, it can take in the algae again and carry on working. But if the sea temperature remains too hot for too long, the algae dies and bleaches, as you see in these photos behind.
That's what's referred to as mass bleaching.
Exactly. So when a coral goes white, it's not necessarily dead yet, but it has spat out the algae, and if it doesn't take on back in the next couple of months, it will die and soon be covered by algae, seaweed, essentially. So you'll see these reefs which are overgrown with seaweed. Now, the stats are somewhere around 35% of the Great Barrier Reef has bleached. To what extent that will come back is unknown and will really be determined by whether the sea temperature drops and the resilience of the coral reef, I suppose.
Now we're talking about, you mentioned that should the water temperature not return to its former temperature within a couple of months, I mean, that will cause the coral to die. Are we talking about months here? Because global warming is a big thing. We've been dealing with it now for years. What do you foresee?
Well, so this particular phenomenon has happened, there's three occasions in the last 18 years, in 1998, 2010, and now, where we have these kind of climate oscillations called El Nino, which create change global weather patterns. And for coral reefs, it tends to increase the water temperature, and then you have these mass bleaching events. So obviously there's an underlying signal of global warming, but when you have these El Nino events, it gets worse, and that's what these coral bleaching events are associated with. Luckily, we seem to have just finished the latest El Nino event, so the water temperature does seem to be cooling down again, but it is very worrying.
Okay, but I mean, we can still say that the Great Barrier Reef is still very much alive. It's still going on. It's still one of the most incredible features of nature. Yeah.
Well, it is. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I ended up in marine biology, and it is very sad for me to think that this reef, which is such an incredible feature globally, is slowly kind of wasting away because of what we're doing to our atmosphere. And I think we really, if anything is a kind of a warning or an alarm bell that we need to do something, this is it.
This is it, yeah. Let's bring it quickly closer to home. The state of our reefs around the South African coastlines, what do you make of that? What's the update? How healthy is it at the moment?
So we have the same challenge. We obviously don't have as much reef as Australia does, but particularly on the east coast, up towards kind of Mozambique and Sodwana, there we have some incredible reefs. But we've also experienced bleaching, not to the same extent, but with these El Nino events, I don't think we've got the latest stats on how bad it has affected our reefs, but in the 2010 bleaching event, for example, we also saw bleaching of our reefs. So we're not immune, as no one is on this global warming issue.
Is there anything that we can do to try and curb this, to try and stop this from happening?
Well, I know
it's a very random question, but...
Not at all. I mean, that's why we're here. I think there are a lot of things that we can do. I mean, at a global level, we really need to be pushing for a strong climate agreement. We need to stop pumping more emissions into the atmosphere and looking at things like renewable energy. At an individual level, there are two things you can do. One is to eat sustainable seafood, because fish also have a really important role to play in coral reefs. They clean coral reefs, so they eat away the algae which is growing on top of them. If we take out all of the fish, the algae overgrows the coral and the coral reef dies. So eating the right fish can make a big difference, and you can use our SASSY list there to choose green, orange or red, but go for green.
All right.
And then the last thing is pollution. So sun cream, for example, if you're using the wrong sun cream, it does kill reefs.
Really?
I can't tell you the exact chemical offhand, but there are chemicals, good ones and bad ones. And if you're using the wrong sun cream, you're killing the reefs.
Awesome. Well, John, thank you very much for joining us this morning. I wish we had more time just to chat about this, but good to know that it's still going. The Great Barrier Reef is still alive and it's still going well. But I think it's also from our point of view, you know, just do everything you can in terms of, you know, just building up your knowledge base as to how you can best protect our coastlines and our reefs as well. Right now, though, it is that time of the morning. Let's quickly get an update on your news.